So hopefully this set the stage for today's talk, because if you've seen, the video lags a little bit, and this is one of the things that obviously these chat platforms like Zoom need to improve to make the experiences even better. But today is a special day, and Mohammed, I would like to thank you for the partnership that we have just entered between SPIA Asia and Entourage. And we are going to stage the next event as a hybrid event. That means SPIA Asia will become a real conference, as well as we putting it into the virtual environment. And as you can see, it's not going to be a Zoom conference like what most people are used these days. This will be a 3D powered virtual conference with a real experience. So thank you very much, Mohammed, for your trust in the SPIA brand.
Thank you very much.
Forward to this one. So please give us a little bit of background of the journey, Entourage, and tell us what this platform is all about.
I wish we have done this webinar on Eve stage, so we wouldn't have all this connection over the Zoom video broadcast. Thank you very much for having me among the rest of the gentlemen. Today is a very interesting topic, exciting topic. Entourage, to start with, is a communication agency started from Dubai, headquartered in Dubai, started like 10, 12 years back, 2000, in the last crisis, I would say 2009. We are positioning ourselves as a live communication agency, working on with our brands, with our partners, our clients, on positioning their brands and reaching into their clients in the right format possible. So we have invested, we have created a full creative studio, we have created a full corporate events team, in addition to PR, media planning and buying. All of them are led by the strategy department. So we study brands from strategic perspective and we act accordingly. That's why we had the pleasure to launch the first partnership with Google in the region, was with Entourage 2011. Until now, we are gratefully the agency of Google in the region when it comes to activations and brand activation and events. Through the pandemic, we have decided to launch a virtual platform, not like just a virtual platform. It's a real event experience, but on the virtual world. So we have created something called Eve as a virtual platform. We can talk about Eve whenever you want.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And you've been very humble, because I know that you're also part of the board of the International Live Events Association. And I know that your company was ranked the #1 enterprise on the Dubai SME 100 index for business performance. So you have been around for a long time, and thank you very much for being here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Eve afterwards.
My pleasure.
Victor, thank you. Victor and Neil, good morning to both of you. You're calling in from Europe, so I know that it's very early, especially for Neil out of the UK. I'm glad you had your coffees, and I can see it's beautiful weather, Victor, wherever you are. So the sky is great. SportsCred, it's a technology that creates new sponsorship assets through social media within the sports field. And Victor, we would love to know a little bit your journey. How did you end up where you are? I know you're a cycler. I know you have a technology background, obviously, engineering background. So please give us a little bit of your journey of how SportsCred came about and why is it relevant at this stage?
Thanks, Eric. Thank you. And good morning to everybody. And thank you to Neil for getting up an hour earlier than I had to this morning. SportsCred came about, I was at London Business School, and there I took an elective, a choice you make, and it was an elective called Managing Sports and Entertainment Businesses. And there we heard from a speaker who said that actually that 90% of all the money that goes into sports sponsorship goes to 10% of athletes worldwide. And that made me sort of sit back and think and consider that actually this 90% of all the athletes don't actually get any funding. And I kind of thought, well, I can fight for that cause. Yeah, that's something to kind of get you motivated. And what was very apparent was that social media was on the increase enormously that time, going back 5-6 years. And even today, it's still, we think we're inundated with social media, but we're still at the beginning of a social media journey in terms of technology and how we communicate with each other. And so I thought, well, if in fact these 90% of the athletes do have a social media presence, they have audiences, and those audiences are valuable to brands. But how can we create then a system whereby brands can actually go and search for athletes that are registered on SportsCred and connect with each other for social media campaigns? This is then the athlete representing the brand and discussing and talking and showing the brand's products via their social media or to their social media audiences. And that's how SportsCred started about 5 years ago now. Fast forward a few years, and today we are focused on clubs, federations, and athlete organizations, whereby they already have a huge body of athletes or players, but at the same time they also have sponsors. And what we are able to do is to create that value for both the sponsors and the clubs and the athletes to do social media campaigns, marketing campaigns.
Good. Is that, I mean, just going back a little bit, because, I mean, as you said correctly, I mean, initially, you know, unless you're on the podium in the 1, 2, 3, you did not get any media exposure. Has social media changed this? Why is there suddenly more interest into, you know, into athletes that are not high performing, that are not the most or the best performing athletes?
It's kind of very interesting, because when you look at this and you have some of your heroes, I mean, like, thank you, Eric, for mentioning my cycling prowess, which is very amateur and very limited, but it's a passion of mine. And we look at some cyclists, you'll see that actually some cyclists who you may even see as part of some kind of world cycling teams, their social media audiences can be actually very, very small, in the low thousands. And then you go and find some other people who may be BMXers perhaps, or mountain bike riders, whose social media audiences can be more in the hundreds of thousands. And you realize that actually it's the content that drives the social media audience, not the sporting prowess. Yeah. And there's a really big distinction there about what actually makes an audience interested in that person, in that athlete. And on the one level, yes, if they are known for their individual athletic ability, that gets them a certain audience, of course. But actually, the bigger audiences lie with people who are able to engage with their audiences on a much more one-to-one scale.
Great.
One-to-one basis. We're going
to come back to this thought a little bit. Neil, you have been on the client side before you joined SportsCred. So good morning to you once again. And it would be great that you give us a little bit more of info about SportsCred. I think you have prepared a small presentation.
I do. So I will share my screen with you. Okay, so you should be able to see. Let's minimize this. Go to you guys. No offense, guys, but I'm going to get rid of you. You should be able to see arguably the greatest midfielder in the world right now. You can almost see my screen. Oops. Okay, so I think Victor's obviously covered this bit, but just by way of just for repetition, hopefully it sticks. We are a technology business. As you mentioned, Eric, my background is more agency. I've worked with, I've been in search engine marketing and social media for about 18 years in total. And while it's, you know, it can be seen as a fairly enviable job, for me, it was always, most of the developments either come out of the platforms themselves, so Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. More latterly, things like TikTok and Snapchat, but it was always the technology that drove the innovation. The agencies and the brands can only really move at the speed that the technology or the platforms allow them, for reasons that Victor sort of touched on. So I joined Victor about 2 years ago. He's the engineer, I'm the media guy. And we've kind of collaboratively with some of the other guys in the team, created a bit of tech that gives a club or gives a brand, in this case, obviously, I'm going to focus much more on rights holders, everything they need to create an entirely new sponsorship asset. And where we differ is that we look, and I'll go into the reasons why, the very first thing we look at is the social media accounts of the players rather than the club. And as I said, we'll go into a bit of detail now, but it's all about creating new revenue. The reason, I think we all know the reason, it's been a bit of a strange year, I would say, not just for sport, for everything, but I think for the first time properly, and I'm relatively new to sponsorship, you know, my background's media. I've been there 2 years working in fan media before I moved into this. But you could hear a lot of people talking about the traditional sponsorship assets, how they needed to change, how they were lagging behind. My experience, having worked with brands, is that they are way ahead of what rights holders currently possess. And obviously, I think 2020 has exposed that. But, and there's always a big but, and I think in this case, we're really seeing, I mean, we've been speaking to clubs now for, I would say, about a year. We really truly finished our rights holder proposition about 2 weeks before lockdown here in England, which was March. But we didn't panic. In fact, what we found is the demand for what we've been talking about actually went up, because we're seeing traditional sponsorship assets being tested almost a breaking point in certain cases. If you look at lower league teams, lower league football clubs, they are so reliant on gate receipts or television presence, of which there was neither. But as I said, it is exciting. We are now seeing clubs approach us in record numbers, saying that they want to unlock social media revenue, and is very much going to be driving sponsorship forward. Speaking of forward, it's often good to look back and see who's done this well. It's probably no surprise, but the NBA are the best at this, and they have been for some time. So we don't know what 2020 looks like, but last year, nearly 1 in every 5 of their sponsorship dollars came from social media. Again, it's a very developed market over there. Brands, again, know the value of this social media. So it's obviously, and I think we look at the NBA, we look at the NFL, we can see that this is a very, very highly effective sponsorship asset based on the amount of money that's being spent on it. This was 3 of the results that we've picked out of, we're part of the European Sponsorship Association, and they conducted a survey, again, back in, I would say this is mid-March. They surveyed 200 sponsorship leaders, they called it. These could be from brands, they could be from the sponsors, the rights holders. 72% of everybody surveyed was actually looking to extend their sponsorship rights, not retract them, which I think is incredibly positive. A little under half are looking to add new assets to sponsorship, and 70% of those are looking for more digital content options for the reasons that we've already discussed. Traditional assets just not really working as they were. And we've seen, I mean, Victor mentioned this, there are 2 parts to our business. We have a marketplace whereby we have over 2,000 athletes that have registered their social media, which allows us to evaluate them, both in terms of what their audience are like and in terms of how valuable that audience is, what the actual media value is. With this amount of data, we can see trends, we can see shifts. And since the 1st of March, on average, now this is across 28 sports, so it's going to be different. But on average, athletes have grown their social media by nearly 1/3, which is huge. We've never seen anything like that. You would say on average, it would, a good athlete would add, without a major event or a World Cup win or something like that, would probably add about 2 to 3% growth every month. So we're seeing a huge shift here in growth. And the real driver behind this, certainly within player engagement, I'm using football here, as you can probably tell. Victor likes cycling, I love football. But during the pandemic, footballs have increased their average video views by 84%. Video is the key driver, not just in player engagement, as we've put there, but in terms of nearly all engagement. You mentioned TikTok, we mentioned Instagram. Instagram Reels is coming out. It's all about video. But what we're seeing now, as we've always seen, you mentioned before about the gold, silver, bronze, brands are attracted to success. That's always been the thing. There's 90% of athletes that have been essentially forgotten about in sponsorship terms. But now we're actually seeing players really show their lives. They're showing the journey. It's something that we call support the journey. We're seeing players with their families at home. We're seeing players that we didn't know were amazing cooks, or that were big travelers that are now, talking about how much they miss travel. So what we're seeing is now affinity interests growing up around the players, which will attract category sponsors to the players, but not the team they play for. So this is in a very, very huge backdrop that 50% of global advertising spend for the very first time ever globally is going to be over 50%. So we always say to clubs, how have you positioned your sponsorship assets? Do you think 50% of that is digital? And the answer in every case is no, even with the biggest clubs. So how do clubs unlock this social media potential? Get the players involved. So it's not just about the size of the audience. On average, a club's team have, the players combined have a 6 times larger audience than the clubs they play for. They also, and this is the telling point, we talk about this before, Eric and I were discussing this yesterday with Victor. Is it really social, or is it a corporate thing? You know, is this like a corporate advert, like a billboard or an out of home? And yes, it is. Social media for most clubs is very static, but their players, it's very, very sociable. So the fans are on average 8 times more engaged with that social media than that of the club that the players play for, which means that a social campaign, if you really want it to influence fan opinion and purchase consideration for sponsors, you need to involve the players. So this is where we come in. We let players share content, clubs share content across the social media accounts of their players. In many cases, they can reach millions of fans. I'll give you an example. You can probably tell from the first screen, our big Manchester United fan. I think they have about 36 million people on Instagram. Paul Pogba has about the same, just one player. And when combined, they can reach about 140 million people, which is, you know, that's a lot of Old Traffords. So we give the tools all in one login to value, execute, and report on social media sponsorship campaigns involving the players. This creates a massive audience of fans, which is brilliant. If you have a marketing team that's spending lots of money on Facebook or Instagram, you know, using biddable spend, you can cut that back because you can put it out across your players. And it's also something new for your commercial team to sell to your existing sponsors or your new ones. It works like this. And I'll be quick now because I appreciate I'm using up a bit of time. So in 2 touches, you connect your players, then you set a revenue share. For example, as the club, we're going to sell an overall social media sponsorship where we share content across all the players and our own social media. For that, the club will keep 20% or 50%, however that's set. They can now, and every player, they can see their audience's data. So they can see what the audience likes, the interests they have, the age, where they live, the languages they speak, their gender, and how engaged they are. Our algorithm then looks at the value of that media and assigns it a price for a tweet, a retweet, an Instagram story, or something longer term, like a long-term sponsorship package. It's all there. Now, as the club, you can create a brief, or you can drag some sponsors' video content or any content into the platform. At the touch of a button, you can send that out to the players, which goes to the app. In one touch, they post it to their social media, and SportsCred builds a report showing this is all of your players, apart from this one, have posted. This is the amount of people you've reached. These are the amount of people that swiped up and went to your website. Because I think likes, comments, and shares are okay for engagement, but to really truly see a sponsorship's value, you want to make sure that it's gone to a first-party owned something from the sponsor, normally a website. And there we go. So this is about a new shared sponsorship asset that can be sold to multiple category sponsors. It's entirely new sponsorship money for players, agents, and clubs, and gives sponsors a direct and quantifiable link to fans, which is a constant battle in most countries. How do I really, really engage with the fans? And allows a social media team to do much more creative things because they can collaborate with the players and they're not spending, hours and hours and hours in administrative tasks. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
So I'm sure Mohammed would have a lot of questions offline now because he comes on the agency side. But
I just wanted to tell Neil, it's very interesting. I come definitely away from the sports industry, but social media and digital today, it affects all the industries, not only the sports. Being maybe a specialist or an expert in the digital transformation on the digital media aspects, or even from e-commerce. Now we are developing a new business in the e-commerce, or even the event industry via Eve. I would say what controls the world today is how are you acquiring your client and how much does it cost you to acquire this client from digital media aspect, from digital media on the digital media assets. It's very important to identify your target, identify who is there you need to reach, and how much does it cost you to reach, and how is the right and effective way to reach. Twitter won't work on some areas, on some brands, on some ways of communication, though it works in some areas perfectly on some brands and etc. So what Neil said, I think for the sports industry is amazing, and he might be as well be able to take it into different industries, because some system like this can help so many business owners to emphasize on the brand and the reach and make money out of this reach and the data bank which he has at the back end. Sorry to jump on the sports, but from digital perspective, I believe today we are going to change the whole world, or I believe the change of the whole world has been started using the pandemic of the COVID-19.
100%. It's a real watershed moment.
Yeah, great. So with social media and brands evaluating engagement, so on, it's all about data. Mohammed, let me stay with you, because my question now is, do digital events now become the new norm? And what, for instance, like with your platform, I think one of the USPs are your analytics. So how important is this to have these analytics for also digital events now?
The virtual events, I think it's unfortunate news for the whole event industry, because it will reduce the amount of revenue which people are making from the event industry. But on the other side of the table, it's great news, because you can continue doing the event, or even you can go on hybrid model with the existing or the current events you have. Our region or our part of the world depends a lot on the conferences business, exhibition business. That's why we saw a big and massive expansion for this industry, especially in UAE and Saudi, over the past few years. But now with the pandemic, people with restrictions, people cannot leave, who cannot go, most of the events either has been cancelled or postponed. That's why the idea of Eve as a virtual platform came into the picture with Entourage, and we developed it in a way that we took our live event experience and we took it into the virtual world. Today, anyone can host a conference or attend a conference. All what he has to do is download the app or go into the web-based environment, create the avatar, and from the avatar, let your avatar represent you within the environment. You can use the avatar to roam, to walk, to meet people, to get to speak to people. Most of us go into live events to meet people. That's why it's very important for us to get to know who is there. We speak to them as an actual, either via chat or video conferencing using our own platform. Then you have the privilege to go and sit in front of a normal stage, like the stages which we enjoy sitting in front of in the real events. The speakers can have a real panel discussion, filmed or live broadcast on the real stage or on the virtual stage. I mean, using the big screen, the giant screen. As well, you can enjoy speaking to chatting with the speaker, asking for a 5 minutes one-on-one meeting with the speaker over the voice video conferencing. In addition to that, you can as well go into the session rooms, enjoy attending several sessions, or even you can go into an exhibition area, check what is there from the exhibitors, speak to them on one-on-one, go as well, check their catalog, even though you can log into the e-commerce and start buying online. What makes Eve more interesting as well, if you are sitting and chatting with Victor or with Neil, and you'd like to have coffee, you can order coffee from the application, and the coffee provider will deliver the coffee to your office or home. So the application is super built based on a live event experience, which it will allow you, or which allows you to live the real event experience, but virtual. From business perspective, the virtual platform is super interesting for the clients, for them to understand the customer journey experience from reporting perspective for each and every attendee. Imagine today we have 1,000 or 2,000 people attending this event or attending this session. And we want to see how did they act, what interests them in Neil presentation, or what interests them when Victor was talking about the sports. All of these analytics, the back end or the data pool of Eve is super intelligent to come up with reporting to tell us how engaged the audience was, how many people attended the session, where they got interested, from facial recognition into a lot of AI technologies used in the back end within the data pool to give us a very smart, detailed rating. So imagine a platform like Eve and how we implemented it on the event industry. What can we do with it in different industries? Look at school, for example. How boring was the school for the past 3 months over Zoom? People discipline, zero discipline for the kids, zero discipline for the teachers, so boring. So imagine that we take a 3D renders of any school and we build it in virtual world. We ask the kids to start creating their avatars. They go inside the school using the avatar. They sit to listen to the teacher, an actual teacher, not virtual, on the virtual platform, with all the content engaging, interacting, animated. All of this will be super engaging. So from school perspective, the e-learning, I think the virtual platform can help. From innovation labs and innovation industries, we can help. Even in the sports, we are helping. And today, I'm super honored and I'm super pleased to announce this partnership with SPIA. We will be accommodating the gala dinner and the conference itself on Eve very soon, using the platform to host all the sports industry professionals like you from different parts of the world. I think from all over the world, to come and hear about the latest and the most interesting topics about sports industry. Then we will be awarding and recognizing the people who made the effect, or who made the difference for the sports industry on a real stage, but virtual over Eve. Eve is super interesting, super exciting. I would like to invite you all, whenever you have time, just download the app, enjoy using it. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Great.
I hope it wasn't long.
Well, we see that technology is not stopping nowhere, not even in the events field, not in the sports field. In regards to social media, Victor and Neil, what technologies need to improve or will see the biggest innovation going forward to deal with the social media boom that we are experiencing right now?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So revenue, I think, is the main thing. I think that I've worked in media long enough to know that as long as the brands are spending the money, things will develop, things will get rebooked, brands will keep spending money, everybody gets paid. So I was genuinely surprised moving from a media background, primarily focused on search engine marketing for about 15 years, where literally every penny spent is accounted for. You know, we talk about ROI in literal terms in search, which is I spent £10 and I got £40 back. And then looking at sponsorship, we're talking about return on investment measured very differently. You know, we're seeing how much did your logo get on TV, and what does that really mean for the business? You know, I can't then look at a spreadsheet and go, okay, well, I've earned £1 million from that. You know, you have econometrics teams that can try and work out the cause and effect, but I think it's going to be tracking fan spend revenue, linking that directly to your sponsorship, and then taking that on another level and then linking that to each individual player. Or each individual, as you can do. I mean, you can do that anyway with Facebook using the pixel, but I'm talking about using lots of players, or it doesn't even have to be players. It could be, we also work with fans. You know, I spent 2 years working with Arsenal Fan TV. They drive about 200 million video views a year as a YouTube channel. It's a staggering amount of engagement. But how do you then connect that to revenue? We've built something into SportsGrid because I find it a bit troubling. Likes, Instagram are going to get rid of all this. It's a little bit of a popularity competition at the best of time, Instagram. But I don't think trying to enter a popularity competition is really what pays the bills for clubs. What pays the bills for clubs, especially now, is money. So I think I don't really care about the likes. I want to see if, let's say I have a football team, 10 of the players, they have a beer sponsor or a cider sponsor, as most of them do. And they're going to say, right, we've got a big game coming up. We want our sponsor, whoever that brand is, are going to give you a free beer. Swipe up to claim that beer. Now, what we want is the technology to show that you've moved from third party to first party, and you're collecting data. It might be in the form of an email address. I've just registered to get my free drink, or it may be something financial. So I think we're building revenue tracking into SportsGrid. It's not quite there yet. At the moment, we can track people moving from Instagram to your website And then if you've got a good data team, you can stitch the two together. But I think there's loads of things, and we can talk about hardware. We can talk about Oculus owned by Facebook and then buying rights and putting you in the stadium and selling subscriptions on that. And that's not very far away. You know, it depends. As soon as the major tech businesses who have more money than literally everybody else will start to buy up rights, they've also got the hardware to put you in the stadium, so they can monetize that on a subscription. But for me, that's the key thing. It's monetization, tracking actual revenue rather than likes, comments, and shares, which are a bit old news.
Right. Yes, we had yesterday an interesting one. We talked about digital transformation, and we looked at it. It's actually more transforming digital. And we talked about there is a shift in revenues, but is it the shift in revenues or is it the shift in interest on the consumers that is driving this whole process? Because you just said that revenues become so important now for rights holders and clubs and everybody. So is it the shift in interest or is it the shift in revenues that then?
Well, it's both. It's the shift in interest is a shift in engagement, and it's a shift elsewhere other than where you are. So you have to adapt to meet that, to get that revenue. As we mentioned, you know, we're looking at a backdrop of 50% of all advertising revenue going digital for the first time. Now, I would suggest that's probably going to be higher than that this year. If you look at the apps that have grown, if you look at the real winners in this, they're not physical, tangible businesses. So I imagine, you know, outdoor, I mean, people are still outdoors, but I mean, there's going to be a big shift, I think, in terms of how that money gets spent. So I think there's two parts to that. Digital transformation, it depends on how transformed you already are digitally. For some people, that's a better website. For some people, that's a CRM. For other people, it's like, well, what's coming after TikTok? You know, what are we doing with wearables? You know, digital transformation it's constant. I find it problematic, digital transformation, because there are agencies set up to do it that go, right, they don't just go, right, to a point where, right, you are now transformed digitally. It's a process, and it's a process that, you know, as we said, technology changes, the platforms change, people's understanding of how to use it gets better, and as a result, it's constantly moving. There's always obviously something you have to look at next, which is coming down the track. But I think at the moment we talk about it's always been user behavior. You know, people are moving on to video, as we said. People are moving on to mobile years ago. You know, people talk about the year of mobile, but that was 10 years plus. You know, that's happened. It's not a separate entity now. It's just a different screen. But now we're looking at necessity taking over. You know, it's not just the audience demand. It is the audience is no longer in a stadium. You know, go where the audience is. That's just the rule of thumb for everything. Wherever your audience is, be there, and then just try and push the envelope. So if you want to digitally transform, look at the next thing, look at what everyone else is doing, and then try and find that other thing they're not.
Yeah. I totally agree. If you allow me, Eric, I totally agree. I just want to one comment on this. Digital transformation is the key word of our era. I believe Ipsos just released the report of 2019 and the first quarter 2020 from digital spend. Saudi alone spent $1.8 billion on digital advertising in 6 months from 2019, the last 2 quarters of 2019 and the first quarter of 2020. So imagine if someone like Etsy, the United States, they made in the e-commerce platform, they made in 2019 $83 million as net profit. They made the same profit in 1 quarter in 2020, which is the second quarter of 2020. So what Neil said is absolutely right. Go and see where your clients are. Go and see where your audience is. Make sure to reach them in the right way. So if TikTok is the right way, please feel free to go and use TikTok. If Twitter, if I don't know what, you have to understand where is your audience and who is your audience and the right way of reaching to them. Sorry to interrupt again, sorry to jump in again, but it's a very interesting topic for me, so I cannot resist. On another note, Eric, there's a question online from Paul. He's asking about the virtual, if you allow me to answer it.
You can answer in the chat box, or you can also answer it live. It's just, it's up to you. Yes, please go ahead.
In 1 second, I would say that Eve will be able to help the brands as well to build the experience of their brand in the application itself, as the application will allow the Eve, application will, or the virtual platform will allow the brand to take over the whole environment and brand it the way it needs. And we have implemented that on the video, which Eric shared at the very beginning. As you see, we have digital screens, you have brand the floor, you can brand the ceiling, you can brand the virtual hostess, you can brand anything. You can, at the end of the day, it's a digital platform. We can implement the brand, the experience of the brand can be seen for our target audience the way you want.
The question, and that's maybe for Victor or so on. I mean, when clubs are so dependent on gate receipts and sponsorship, and suddenly you're offering social media revenues that usually is driven by probably the athletes, not necessarily talking about sports, does that not take away actually from revenues from the clubs and from the rights holders? Is that not like almost like a parallel universe that we're creating through the social media? And how can we bring these together?
There's two elements to that, I think. The first element is that generally clubs and those in decision-making positions in clubs don't really understand social media. So they tend to be typically males around my age. And for them, social media is something their kids do. And people generally sort of feel that I need to do social media, but doing it means hiring some people who are much younger than them and giving them some computer terminals or mobile phones and saying, please get on and do our social media, and don't really appreciate what it really means. Now, it also is true that in sponsorship packages, so invariably sponsorship is sold as packages. So there may be an element about what you can physically have in the stadium, and also included in that, invariably at the very end part is, and also social media. Now that is a very common thing to have in sponsorship packages. Now what you really should be looking at is saying that and social media part can really be separated from the rest of your package. So make one package for your physical assets, maybe make one package for your digital assets. But within that digital assets, it's not a matter of just putting a logo on your website as a club. That's obviously got some value, but it's more the interaction you're going to be able to get with fans on social media, and having the ability to value that apart from your main or the other packages is what's really key. So you're able to create this asset and make it not so it's cannibalizing your existing sponsorship, but actually a separate line revenue item on your P&L. Yeah, I hope that explains.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mohammed,
and that,
sorry, yeah.
And that's new for clubs, because social media for them is an expense, invariably, and they see it on the kind of below the line, on the expenses items, right? It's social media expenses, etc., rather than it being in the income line. And what we do is make sure it's on the income line rather than being on the expense line, right? And that's a major transformation for most clubs. And many will tell you, no, we're very innovative. You know, there's always that kind of word that pops up all the time. But when presented with this, it is actually quite a fundamental shift in understanding how this could actually really be an asset for them and how to generate revenue from it. We speak to a lot of clubs. I mean, we're talking about the best clubs in the top leagues. And you ask them about social media, are you earning money from social media? And the answer is 99% of the time, no, we're not earning money from social media. Okay. And that is this resource or this asset they have, it appears to be one that hasn't yet been maybe digitally transformed, if you like, or been accessible to them or understood how they can be doing it. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is although many people have ideas about how they can do it, they haven't yet got the tools to be able to do it. And that's where we're able to step in and help them.
If I could just add to that, just a little bit as well. I think you've got to give the brand something good to buy. You know, social media for clubs is, I mean, you look at pretty much the biggest clubs, and most of the social media is just photographs of players, which I can get anywhere. You know, I watch them on television, I know what they look like, but there's not enough interactivity. It's social. The clue is social. Where can I basically engage the fans to do something? Where can I ask something of them? How can I give them something back? You know, how can I get them to share things? How can I get this participation beyond just, oh, that looks good, I like that picture, I'm going to leave. And I think that's where, you know, we mentioned the players, this is their real life. So the narrative kind of builds itself to a degree. Whereas I think the clubs struggle to find interesting things to say beyond the sport, you know, which is obviously the sponsors are not indelibly tied to the sport. It might be a kit sponsor like Adidas or New Balance, in which case, yes, but it's a travel brand. How do you make that relevant to football? You have to have a branded content idea. And I think going back to Victor's point about, I've worked in agencies for years, Victor's point about the expense, very rarely in an agency are social media people and creatives doing anything creative, because they spend so much time with administration to get, you know, contracts out to people, to basically track things. Reporting takes days at times. So most of your money as a rights holder paying an agency, well, not most, but a lot of it will be on all these kind of administrative tasks. What you want is someone to go, right, we are going to creatively overhaul your attitude internally, and therefore how it's viewed externally to social media. And it doesn't take that much time. You have the time, but your people are probably doing the wrong jobs. So I think if you just, it's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. You know, give the sponsors something good to go and buy. You don't have to put it straight up on the screen. You go, here's an idea for a travel partner. We've got 3 players, and we can see the data now. We've got 3 players who are very, very passionate about travel. So we're going to do, you know, we can interview them on the team bus going to the match, or we can have them film themselves on holiday and do I mean, it's an obvious idea, but it's not really being done at the moment. So you can take that to 50 travel brands and say, look, with this guy here, he's got 2 million followers. The rest of the club, we've got another 20 million. You look at your average brand, they never get anywhere near that kind of, it costs them a lot of money to reach that amount of people. So you can charge quite a lot of money, but give them something good to buy, and someone will buy it. Because at the moment, you know, all the action's over with the players, not with the rights holders.
It's interesting, sorry to jump in as well, just to go on. Some clubs, and Neil, you've uncovered some little gems at different clubs that do social really well, but they don't tend to be the top clubs. And the top clubs tend to do what we kind of often call, rather than social media, corporate media. But some of the other ones who are lower division, perhaps, who haven't got resources, are really creative, and they really engage fans. And they do, there's examples of you know, the player at the end of the match coming off all sweaty and kind of out of breath, you know, and talking directly to his mobile phone, and it's sponsored content. It's still sponsorable, but this is actually his emotion of what it was like playing, as opposed to standing behind a billboard of 10 different sponsors' names there and going through a kind of interview process with something very static and really devoid of any real passion, right? So there's really it's the same thing. It's the interview with the player after the game, but one is behind a kind of corporate sponsor board, and the player is looking around trying to get away, is go and talk to his other colleagues, friends, etc., players, while the other guy is intensely describing, you know, what happened and how tense the match was when they ultimately either, you know, won or lost somehow, right? And they have different engagements. I mean, the different engagement is enormously different, one to the other. Yeah.
And one's shot on an iPhone. That's the other thing. You know, there's no barrier to do this. You know, if you've got a phone, you can do social media well.
Yeah.
Is the technology industry impacted by this? I mean, are smartphones of the future now going to change dramatically, able to serve actually the audiences? Because if social media is supposed to be social and people are more and more using their phones, but you know, technology still limits us. I mean, we've seen it with the communication platforms, we've seen it with mobiles, we've seen it with, so technology is still lagging a little bit behind. Is this where the big spike is going to come in development and innovation?
Possibly streaming. Yeah, I mean, the rest of it, you know, if you're capturing something on a phone, I think they're more than adequate now. You know, you can get crystal clear. You know, the example, I'd urge you to go and have a look actually at 2 teams, Motherwell, who play in Scotland, and Leyton Orient, who are a lower division here. And they do things very, very cleverly just on an iPhone. I think having attempted in my previous agency, we did a lot of things on Facebook Live. As soon as you went up to 1080, it stopped working. So for me, streaming is probably where it needs to improve. Other than, I think phones, you know, I don't look at phones, go, I don't know what this isn't doing at the moment. You know, it's good at phoning people. I can capture videos, I can watch videos, so I think that they're really well set up for social media as it is. But I think when you're talking about something like today, imagine this with Chelsea or Man United sat here having a discussion and presenting their corporate video to sponsors and to key fans. They're all going to make sure it's streamed. So for me, I think probably streaming bandwidth.
What about Mohammed, dynamic advertisements and so on? Because advertisements, something are still pretty boring. And I think there's more targeting advertising now coming out due to algorithms and more information that can be captured. But do you see any shift or innovation in terms of how advertising is now targeting consumers through social media?
I believe social media platforms, they're making the money while we're sitting and just talking. Basically, if you look at Ronaldo today, he is #1 Instagrammer in the world. How much money is he making from playing the football? How much money he is making from using his social media assets? I believe as advertising on the digital today, on the digital world, is playing a major role. Social media platforms is helping everyone to be famous and to be influencer, if you don't mind me using this word. On top of that, they are making money. Simply, brands are desperate for each and everyone who can make sure that this person or this influencer can take the message or deliver the message of my brand. I believe with the virtual platform, if I can go back to talk about Eve, imagine today if I launch within the mobile phone on using the Eve itself, the Eve application. On the mobile phone, I launched something called VR or AR using the application. How interesting this will be for the brands. A, for them to engage with the brand, for the audience to engage with the brand, or B, to measure the reports, measure the reactions, measure the interaction. Today, what social media platforms is lacking is giving real report or detailed report of what's happening on the platform. Google Analytics is one of the best tools, but at the end of the day, it's not an enough tool to give you all the information you need. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I'm not sure about TikTok, but most of them, the reporting system or the back end of the reporting system is super intelligent for them, but it's not they're not giving the intelligence for the brand audience, for the brand and about their audience to understand more and how they can empower them more to spend more on the platforms. This is what I think.
That's an interesting one. Again, it came up yesterday, I think, when we were talking, Neil and Victor, we're talking about TikTok. And you mentioned earlier, Neil, a little bit that there's a little bit of a shift that the audience is much more interested in the personal things of the athletes rather than just the on-pitch performance in this case. So how do brands now unlock, let's say, the success of TikTok? Very young demographics, one very young audience, but no spending power. How do we deal with this? I mean, and how does it relate to other social media platforms like your Instagram or Twitter and so on and so on? What's the differences there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been that I've worked in media long enough to know that everyone was just fighting over millennials. Millennials, I don't want to put everybody. I find it all quite troublesome as well, putting people in the same bucket, because millennial can be, 12 years difference in age, 13 years difference in age. So, and they're all going to have massively different interests. Some of them aren't even going to be on social media. It's rare, but some of them won't. But the fact is, it's very TikTok is young. The spending power isn't really there, but it's about potentially influencing. Which is weird. It's probably the opposite end of the spectrum I'm going to use, but one of my old clients was Stanner stair lifts, which was a thing to getting old people up the stairs. Now, you never sold that to the old people. You targeted people in their 40s and 50s that were worried about their parents. And it's paradoxically, it's the same shift, but for younger people. So younger people themselves, I've got two of them, they are influencers to me because they want stuff that they've seen. It's about kind of influencing their opinion, how they feel about a brand. I mean, if you look at BMW, they're moving into esports. Esports is incredibly innovative. But my friend he's the CTO of one of the largest esports teams, and he was pitching to BMW. And I remember saying to him, really? who your average age is about sort of 17, 18. They're not going to go buy a BMW, but they're thinking about the next generation. They're thinking, plus it's quite cheap. That's the other thing, to reach people on that scale. It's quite expensive to do it biddably through Facebook and through Instagram, and more latterly through TikTok. But as a media buy, it really does stack up quite nicely. But getting back to your question about the young, it's about building loyalty, I think. Some of them are going to say to their parents, look, I want to buy this thing. They're going to go, great. But I think it's about a brand experience, and it's about having a bit of fun. TikTok's built on fun, You can also say cynically that the best way to take on TikTok is to ban it in one country and then launch something for rival products, as we're seeing over in America. I think that whole thing is very, very not incredibly surprising, but I think that's what happens when a new idea comes out. There is such a dominance now with Facebook group that they did it with Snapchat, they're doing it with TikTok now, that I think the way that they are, it's not like a playing field where people go, great idea, this is a whole new thing. The one dominant party will come in, build the same thing and use its user base, I think, to kind of take market share. So it's an interesting one, TikTok. And I genuinely don't know what's going to happen with it. That's the thing. We haven't added it to our platform yet. We're going to. But thinking the UK and the US are two massive markets for us, it's possibly going to go in the US. It may well go in the UK if that's the case. So it might just be that we see it like something like Weibo or Yandex in Russia. It might just be this is a very specific platform for targeting people in that country of that age, as opposed to, well, Facebook's everyone, Instagram's everyone. But if you really want to get deeper into those countries, then target TikTok through TikTok.
What it did do, though, is confirm that short form video is really the area where there's engagement. I mean, that's what it's, I think TikTok confirmed. That this idea of a 30-second video is one which people are prepared to look through. YouTube does the longer form video. There's other ones where they're even shorter than that. But TikTok, I guess, really could confirm with the little tools they add to it how engaging short form video can be as well.
Is that going to stay, or is that a trend that we are seeing during the current pandemic?
I think, well, yeah, I think that's the thing. I think all forms of content will stay. I mean, it depends what mood you're in. If I want longer form content, I'll go on YouTube. Facebook are launching, because Facebook spent ages telling us, oh no, it's short form, because that's the way their ad model works. If you watch something for 3 seconds, it counted as a view. So their narrative is forced by their revenue model, which is short form. But YouTube is still huge. That's where most influencers started, and where the biggest ones still prevail. And they get loads of ad revenue from this, and brands get loads of exposure. Although YouTube it's harder to do. It's not just a case of using a phone. It tends to be more edited and it takes more effort. But I do think that there's a place for everything, depending on the mood you're in. If I want to learn something, I don't want a 30-second. It depends if it's learning or leisure, I guess. As a football fan, I spend more time on YouTube, because the YouTubers there can sort of dissect the match. They can go through the lineups. They can talk and give an example. As I said, I work for a thing called the Ball Street Network. So we had Arsenal Fan TV, Man United, Liverpool, the biggest fan channels. And we brought in a sponsor for that. They drove 290 million video views over the course of the season, and the average video view was 3.5 minutes. So I think that is, I don't know whether you call 3.5, I'm old enough to read books still, so I don't know if you call 3.5 minutes long form or not, but in internet terms, it definitely is. So it worked out as nearly 750 million minutes that the advertiser, Ladbrokes, in this case, is a gaming brand, had sponsored. They spent a lot of money doing it, but how are you going to get 750 million worth of engagement long form? But then short form, it fits another demographic and another interest and a different mindset. If I'm on TikTok, Victor, who's in his, let's say, early 50s, phoned me, so I've just spent 2 hours on TikTok. We were researching this a few months ago. So I don't know, it's almost like I don't know, just turned it on, it just kept going. And before I knew it, I'd sort of gone down this video rabbit hole. But I don't think you've gone back. I don't think you've gone back to it, Victor, but it suits the mood. I think if you're a brand, and it was going back to what we said earlier, wherever your audience are, build something for it. So if your audience is on TikTok, do TikTok. Well, your audience is on TikTok, they're just maybe not old enough to buy your stuff yet, depending on, if it's trainers, fine, be on TikTok, 100%. If it's a car brand, maybe not so much. But they should, and I imagine will coexist.
Well, we have to be looking at time a little bit. So it's great. Like I said, I mean, we started with a technology topic and we're diving deep into social media and advertising and so on. What are the trends for 2021, Mohammed, if we're looking from a brand's perspective or from a rights holder perspective? Maybe Neil and Victor are talking from a rights holder's perspective later, but maybe from your side, Mohammed, from a brand's perspective. How is 2021 going to look like in terms of advertising? What trends do you see within technology, even within, I mean, within your agency business or the Eve business?
I believe the question should be how September 2020 will look like, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Sorry. But to tell you the truth, the uncertainty which we are living every day is making people, businesses, brands, all around, everything around you is being stagnant today. 2021, I believe we should be going back to definitely focus more on the digital, focus more on working from hybrid. I believe the hybrid model will start seeing more bright and more development in 2021. I believe we will remain, my personal opinion, we will remain going with the same model of 2020 until the end of 2021. I don't see people are yet ready to go back into the old norm. They are, I think, they made the new norm as their comfort zone, which will take us for a couple of months, if not a year.
Great. Yeah. Victor and Neil, from a rights holder's perspective, where do we go?
I'll just jump in quickly, then Neil, please then continue. I really think it's about ROI. We're going into a world recession, really, and businesses everywhere are going to be looking at all their spending and cutting back in certain areas, maybe increasing in other areas. But spending by businesses, by brands, is going to be absolutely on the spotlight. And things that don't provide an ROI or some kind of tangible return are going to be ones that are going to have a question mark next to them, whether they in the end get cut or not. And so it's really about, if you are the rights holder, be sure that you're able to be going back to your sponsors and offering them something new, because if you can only offer the same old stuff, it's likely to be in jeopardy. I
also think the type of sponsors will shift as well. So it's going to be tech businesses, apps. Mohammed mentioned the new normal. New normal for me involves apps, gardening. So there's going to be different. I don't think there's going to be a huge gardening sponsor on the front of Man United anytime soon, but we are going to see businesses that traditionally did. I think a lot of gaming companies, for example, they may pull out a little bit. And I think companies, tech businesses with more money will come in. And I also think, as we see, I mentioned before, tech businesses buying up rights and streaming them. So it won't necessarily be to Juventus. That Ronaldo's first game for Juventus was on Facebook. Amazon buy up lots of NFL games. We're seeing Amazon playing streaming Premiership games here for free. So I think it's all going to be about getting our attention. The networks just spend lots and lots of money. But incidentally, TikTok spent loads of money to get to this as well. Let's not forget about, they didn't just build something good. They've spent millions in getting people to download their app. So I think we're starting to see the tech giants really flex their muscles, I think. So we might see them start to buy up more rights. And I sort of mentioned at the beginning, I don't think this is this year. I don't know when it's going to be, but I imagine it will happen. Hardware, like wearables. So if you own the rights, you've got a large network with 2 billion people on it, and you can put a premium subscription model. You can put me in Old Trafford by just putting an Oculus on me. So I'll just wear a wearable headset, so I can look right. There's Eric, there's Mohammed. It's off to get a beer, and that's going to be a subscription model, presumably. So I think it's the sponsors themselves will shift, and the way they activate the sponsorship depends on the assets they own.
Very good. Gentlemen, we're 2 minutes over time, extra time, like we say in football. It's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate your time. It's been great. Mohammed, thank you very much to Entourage, Victor and Neil to Sportscred, and everybody who joined in here today. Also to our partners from One Place Sports who did the live streaming today, and obviously the Retifaro Resort that is in charge of picking a winner now for this amazing Maldives trip. We are back next week at the same time. And I would like to say thank you. Everybody stay safe and have a great day. going forward.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you very
so
much indeed. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.